Hello and welcome to today's video where we're going to be talking about why it is so hard to get out of the pattern of shaming and blaming and guilting ourselves. Why finding compassion for ourselves can be one of the most challenging things we will ever do. Because again, I understand, right, that I can sit up here and I can say this over and over and over again, that the key to this path, the key to us figuring out why we are the way we are, why we hurt the way that we hurt, why we have the habits that we have, why we're self-sabotaging, I say all this stuff, right? Like compassion, compassion, compassion. The first step is always compassion. Be nice to yourself. Stop shaming, blaming, and guilting yourself. And like I said, I know that I can sit up here and I can just say that to you over and over and over again. But the actual practice of doing this, the actual application of this in our real personal lives can be incredibly challenging. Okay? It can be one of these things that seems like it should be just so obvious, so what we should do, right? And it sounds nice and you hear me say it and it sounds like something we should be doing. But then as soon as, right, we stop listening to this video, we walk away from a coaching session, as soon as we're out of the presence of this, we go back into our normal life and automatically, it feels like for a lot of us, we just start shitting all over ourselves, right? We go into that state of just believing there's something wrong with us, we're broken in some way, we're shameful in some way, there are things about us we need to fix. This isn't good enough, that isn't good enough, this isn't good enough, that isn't good enough, which is, the old knowledge, that which is not resonating with me anymore. Like, how do I get rid of it? This is what I'm talking about today, right? Is that the patterns of believing that there's something wrong with us and believing that the way that we are going to feel better in life is to fix ourselves, is to change ourselves, is to, become someone who can do this or someone who can do that, or I don't have these coping mechanisms anymore, or I need to get rid of this self-sabotaging behavior, or I need to change this way of interacting in my relationships, and I need to get this job, and I need to get my life figured out in this way, and all this stuff. That can just feel so real and so obvious. And for a lot of us, again, we are in this state where that just seems like the default, that if anyone were to look at our lives, they would say the exact same thing. That's how it feels. That's how it feels to us. That's what we think, that it's just, this is the most obvious thing in the world, and there is no questioning it. There is no believing that there could be something else. And even getting to this place of feeling like if we were going to have compassion for ourselves, that would be the wrong thing to do, right? That there is just so much resistance that we have to having compassion for ourselves. And this feeling of like, okay, yeah, she can sit up there and say that about herself or about other people or about what other people are going through. But if she really knew me, right? If she really knew my story, if she really knew the thing I was doing, she would be like, oh, that's awful. That's too much. That's bad. That is a thing you really do need to stop doing. That is a thing you really should feel shitty about. Like, everyone out there thinks that they are the exception to this rule. And I guarantee you that if you're sitting here thinking, okay, sure, but if she knew my thing is actually horrible. My thing is actually so embarrassing and shameful and shitty. And I do need to change. And if she were to really figure out what was going on with me, she would be like, yeah, no, that's a bad thing. Or anyone would think, yeah, no, that's a bad thing. And I get it. And that's, again, why I'm just going to keep talking about this. Because this tool of finding compassion for ourselves, which is really just being able to say, I am where I am for a reason. I I am where I am in my life for a reason. I feel how I feel for a reason. I think what I think for a reason. I have the habits that I have for a reason. And it's not just because I'm a shitty human being who's making bad choices. It's not just because I'm irresponsible or not taking responsibility for myself. It's not because I'm fundamentally broken or messed up on some level. It's because I am doing the best that I can with what I know, with what I have been through, to try to keep myself safe and to try to get my needs met. That's what having compassion for yourself is. Everything that I'm doing, everything that I am, everything that I think, all of my habits, everything can be traced back to me learning somewhere along the way that this is what is required for me to be safe, to survive, to be okay, to live in this world, and to get my needs met. That's what having compassion for yourself is. Assuming that there is a good reason why you are the way you are, why you do the things you do. And then the second part of that is, if our habits are harmful, if the way that we are doing things can cause, objective harm to ourselves or others, the way we are going to change that is not through fixing ourselves, but through understanding why we do what we do, understanding the needs that we're trying to get met, understanding the adverse experiences that we've been through that we need to process, understanding the flaws in our perception and the way that we're seeing ourselves in the world, so that we can start to develop new habits, new ways of getting our needs met, new ways of supporting ourselves that are more productive, that are more in alignment with actually getting our needs met and causing less harm. Or realizing that the way that we are right now is fine. And the only reason we think it's wrong and bad and shameful and it shouldn't be this way is because of the conditioning we've been given. And it's getting through the conditioning and getting through these toxic stories of this is what you have to be and this is what you have to do in order to be a good person, in order to be loved, in order to be safe, so that we can figure out a way of life that actually works for us and feels good for us, even if it goes against culture or our conditioning. Okay, so compassion for ourselves is not necessarily, well, it isn't, the destination. It's not the final stop on the path, right? A lot of us feel like if I have compassion for myself, then I'm letting myself off the hook, right? I have all these things that are wrong with me. I have all these things that I'm doing that are bad and that are destructive and that are chaotic, that hurt me and hurt other people. I have all these things that are wrong with me, and I absolutely know that they're wrong with me. And if I were to just have compassion for myself, isn't that just giving myself an excuse to stay being shitty? And this is what everyone right? So now we're getting into it, okay? So I've explained what compassion for ourselves is. And again, I want you to understand that having compassion for yourself isn't about saying, I'm going to stay being exactly how I am right now forever, if how I am right now is painful. That's not what having compassion for yourself is. It's a first step. Because what compassion for ourselves does is it helps us to start to see why things are the way they are. Compassion is the doorway to being able to understand why. To being able to understand why. And when we say, okay, there is a good reason for why I am doing what I am doing. It's not because I'm just fundamentally flawed. It's not because I'm bad. It's not because I'm shameful. It's not because I'm just making bad choices. There's a reason why I am doing this. We make ourselves feel safe for the first time for a lot of us. This is what compassion does. It shifts us into a nervous system state of safety, of feeling like we are going to be okay. And it's in that state of safety that we can then start to understand things from a broader perspective and a wider perspective and a more grounded in reality perspective. And that is what gives us the capacity to make productive changes. Okay? You are not going to change your patterns. You are not going to find a way of life that feels good for you. You are not going to find alignment with what feels right for you in your life and your purpose and what feels fulfilling by hating yourself, shaming yourself, and blaming yourself. Because when you hate yourself and you shame yourself and you blame yourself, when you have these stories running in your head 24/7 that tell you that you're broken, that you're bad, that you're not good enough, that you're not doing what you should be doing, that you're messing up your life, that you're fundamentally broken, this shifts your nervous system into a state of fight, flight, freeze, fawn, fear. Okay? This is the foundation of why compassion is the key to changing everything. When we are in that state of fear, when we are in that state of fear that we automatically go into when we feel that we are being shamed, blamed, guilted, told that we are not good enough, our perception shrinks. Okay? This is what happens when we are in a state of fear. Our perception shrinks. Our capacity to understand things shrinks. We narrow our focus. And our brains and our bodies want to do only what they have already done. Because evolutionarily, when we were in a state of fear, when we were in a life-threatening situation, it was not the time to try to take in as much information as possible, right? Evolutionarily, for most of our human development, fear meant I'm about to be eaten by a lion. There's a storm coming. Someone is about to stab me in the face. And the best way to handle that is to act immediately, to act instinctually, to do what we've always done, because what we've always done worked to take us out of that dangerous situation. Do you understand? So when we are in a state of fear, we cannot try to shift ourselves into a state of greater understanding. We cannot try to take in more information. We are not in a state where we are capable of understanding something that we've never understood before, or of taking new and different action. Because in that fear state, our nervous systems are programmed to just do what we've always done and act quickly and narrow our focus, because that was what was most advantageous to us as we were evolving. So remember, as hard as this is to accept, when we are in that state of fear, we are not operating from logic and wisdom and our frontal lobe and our highest capacity. When we are in that state of fear, we are not operating from our highest logic and our highest wisdom and our best problem-solving capacity. We're in a nervous system state where our instincts take over, our programming takes over. What we've always done and how we've always seen things and what we've always experienced takes over. So many of us believe we're acting from our highest awareness when we're shitting all over ourselves, when really you're in the most primal part of yourself when you're in that state. You're not acting from logic. You're not acting from highest reasoning. As much as you might think, this all makes perfect sense to me. I am this way because I'm shitty, and this is what I need to do about it, and these are the self-help things that I'm going to do, and I'm just never going to do that bad behavior ever again, and here's the, I'm going to do 75 hard, or I'm going to go on a water fast, or I'm going to blah, blah, blah. It seems so logical. Until we take a step back and we think, wow, okay, how many times have I done this cycle? Right? How many times have I tried to fix myself in this exact way, completely convinced that I was seeing things clearly, completely convinced that it was going to work this time, only for me to end up right back here, exactly where I am right now, over and over and over again. Probably 1,000,000 times for most of us. Because that's what the fear state does. It kicks us into instinct. It kicks us into pattern. It kicks us over into doing what we've always done. And if what you've always done isn't working, you need a shift. If you are sick of your pattern, of trying to fix yourself, and thinking you're on it, and thinking you got it, and knowing exactly what's wrong with you and how you're going to fix it, and doing the self-help loop and the self-improvement loop, and the cleansing and the fasting and the buying that supplement and doing this retreat and that plant medicine and over again, and you just keep ending up in the same place where you feel terrible, you feel like you're out of alignment, you have all your habits, you don't feel like you're living your purpose, all of these things, you need something different. But remember, that fear state only wants to do what you've always done. Because to your body and to your nervous system, you were in a state of fear when you were shitting all over yourself. Which means your body perceives you're about to die. And then that coping mechanism that you do, or that self-help, or that self-improvement, or that way you see things, you do it, you don't die. Your body thinks, it worked. That's what saved my life. So now every time I'm scared, I'm going to do that. Even though it didn't actually work, it didn't change anything. It didn't make you feel better. It didn't change your life. That fear state is forcing you into your instincts. It's forcing you into your patterns. It's forcing you into not using your highest wisdom and your logic and your understanding and working from true awareness. You're working from pattern. Okay? So this is why shaming and blaming and guilting ourselves is the best way to make sure we never move forward in life. Because it puts us into a state of fear. And in a state of fear, we are only ever going to do what we've always done. We are only ever going to repeat patterns. We are not operating from true understanding and wisdom and expansion in that state. So from here, why? Why does shame, blame, and guilt put us into a state of fear? And for most of us, again, when we're in that shame, blame, and guilt state, it doesn't feel like we're in a state of fear. It feels really empowering. For a lot of us, when we shame, blame, and guilt ourselves, we think, I'm on it. I've got my plan. Right? This is just the thing that's wrong with me. I need to get rid of this behavior. I need to stop being this way. I need to fix myself. I need to do this program or this fast or this retreat or this 75 hard or whatever. It feels really empowering. A lot of us believe that our fear state is a state of empowerment. But it's not. It's actually, again, the childhood coping mechanism that says the only reason anything bad could be happening to me, the only reason anything bad could be happening to me is because I'm doing something wrong. Right? We learn this deep in our nervous systems at the beginning of our lives. When we are in that temporary codependent relationship with our caregivers, we depend on them for everything. We depend on them for everything. We do not have the capacity to understand ourselves, to provide for ourselves, to care for ourselves, to understand the world around us, to protect ourselves from danger, to anything. When we are in pain, when we are struggling, when we're not getting our needs met, the entire way that we get out of that is through our caregivers seeing us, understanding us, loving us, having empathy for us, and fixing it for us. And then eventually at age-appropriate times, teaching us how to do that for ourselves. When we have big emotions as small children, they're incredibly overwhelming. And if we don't have caregivers that teach us how to process through them, that teach us that it's okay to feel big feelings, that teach us how to look for what our feelings are trying to tell us, we learn to fear our big feelings. We learn to run from them. And that turns into patterns of numbing and suppressing and all of these things that we do to get rid of our negative emotions. When we have parts of ourselves that we want to express that get shamed, blamed, and guilted by our caregivers, we then develop existential relationships with parts of ourselves that are natural and that are always going to be there, But then when they start to come up, there's this big, dark, deep fear that if this comes up, I'm going to be rejected, I'm not going to be loved, I'm not going to be cared for. And then I'm going to die. And so we learn to suppress these parts. We learn to shame them and hate them and blame them and try to get rid of them. Because what we're doing is we're trying to be pleasing to our caregivers so that they will love us, they will understand us, and they will meet our needs. When our caregivers abuse us and harm us, we can't understand that caregivers can be shitty. All we can do as small children is think, what did I just do to cause them to be like this? What's wrong with me that they are harming me this way? It's very confusing and very challenging, and it makes us hate ourselves. Children don't learn to hate their parents, they learn to hate themselves. And then we grow up as adults who constantly blame ourselves when other people hurt us, when other people are shitty. And then we get into the new age, right? And the new age says, you're attracting it. You're the reason people are shitty to you. You're the reason you're in toxic relationships, and you just need to change. But they don't tell you how, because they're not addressing that you're not making choices from your highest logical adult perception. You're making choices from your nervous system program, from your emotional being, from your instincts, not from your logic. Right? So we're all trying to logic our way out of our nervous system programs. And that main nervous system program is that when you are not loved, you are not safe. Because that is the very first program that we ever got. Why do I have to keep attacking myself? This is why. The very first nervous system program we ever got, that was programmed into us before our logic, before our adult mind was online, was caregivers are my source of everything. If they do not take care of me, if they do not give me the things that I need, if they don't help me process my emotions, if they reject parts of me, if they harm me on some level, the only power I have is to blame myself and to try to fix my behavior so that they will love me and then make my pain go away or give me the things that I need. So then we grow into adults who, when we are in pain, when our needs are not being met, when we don't feel good in life, the automatic response is, I am broken, I am bad, I am shameful, I am sinful. What is wrong with me? What is the thing that I am doing? What is the thing about me that is causing this that I need to change so that I will be loved? We grow into adulthood where we start to live in ways that don't align with what our caregivers would have approved of. And we constantly feel like we're doing life wrong and like everything is bad. We grow into adults who then take that, if I'm not being loved, I'm not safe, and we project it out onto everyone. Our caregivers, our partners, our friends, our coworkers, the world at large. And we feel like every ounce of rejection is a sign that we're not safe, we're not okay, we're broken, there's something wrong with us, and we're not going to survive. And again, we're not consciously thinking these things, but this is how it feels. And so then we're in a cycle of constantly shaming and blaming and guilting ourselves, trying to become what our caregivers wanted us to be, what we think society wants us to be, the people around us, because we genuinely, on a nervous system level, believe that if we were to be loved, if we were to be accepted, if we were to live up to expectation, we're going to get our needs met. We're going to be safe. We're going to get what we need. Because that's what we really want. We are seeking safety. We are seeking safety. Because what we want is to get our needs met and to be able to express ourselves. And the nervous system program most of us are running is, in order to get my needs met and in order to express myself, I need to be loved and approved of in these very specific ways. The conditioning I got from my caregivers, the conditioning I got from my friends and my family and my siblings, and then the conditioning of culture. This is who you have to be, and this is what you have to do in order to be accepted, in order to be approved of. And when you are accepted and when you are approved of, that is when you're going to be safe. That's when you're going to get your needs met. That's when you can express yourself. We're operating from a childhood program, and we don't see it because it's just normal. It's what all of us are doing. So then when we try to have compassion for ourselves, when we try to say, this isn't my fault, I'm not shameful, I'm not bad, I'm not broken. The reason this is so hard is because it then triggers the nervous system into thinking and feeling, well, then that means we're not going to be loved. I'm not going to be loved. I'm not going to be approved of. I'm not going to be accepted. If I don't change myself, if I don't fix myself, if I don't get rid of all of these things that are quote unquote wrong with me, and get rid of all of my self-sabotaging behaviors and become this ideal version of myself, there's this deep core belief that that means we will be rejected forever, we will be alone forever, we will never be loved, we will never be safe, and we will never get our needs met. It feels dangerous to have compassion for ourselves because to our nervous systems, this idea that if I fix myself to be loved and accepted by my caregivers, by everyone around us, then I'm going to be safe and I'm going to get my needs met. So if I don't change myself, if I'm not shitting all over myself, if I'm not attacking myself, I won't become that. And then I'm going to be alone forever and I'm never going to be safe. So I want to stay in this state of self-rejection and just trying to fix myself and trying to become what my caregivers wanted me to become. Deep program in my body. I'm not even consciously thinking of it. So that there's that promise that when I finally become that, I will finally have that safety and security and provision and self-expression that I've always wanted. That is why having compassion for ourselves is so hard. Because to the nervous system, at first, when we start to try to have compassion for ourselves, our bodies go into that state of like, oh my God, but then that means we're not going to be loved. And then we're not going to be safe. We're going to die. You see? The thing that is the medicine, having compassion for yourself, being kind to yourself, being on your own side, choosing to see yourself as good, is also what your body perceives to be the poison at first. This is why this is so hard. Because again, it's not logical. It's not coming from your logical mind. It's having to push through deep nervous system programs to be able to see that when I love myself, when I am kind to myself, when I have compassion for myself, number one, I don't automatically burst into flames and everything in my life falls apart. We have to start to practice giving ourselves an experience that when we have compassion for ourselves, when we start to assume the best in ourselves, it doesn't lead to our entire world falling apart and everyone rejecting us and us losing everything we've ever had. We have to somatically give ourselves that experience. And this is why sometimes we need the bridge of a coach or a program like my mystery school, or a therapist if you want to find a good therapist, someone who can be a compassionate witness for you to help you start to see that it's not everyone rejecting you, and that if you love yourself, it doesn't equal everyone rejecting you in the whole world telling you you're horrible and everything falling apart. And this is why in my one-on-one work and in my school and all of these things, I teach you how to develop that compassionate witness for yourself. Because in order to be able to reprogram ourselves, that compassion for ourselves doesn't equal the whole world falling apart. We have to slowly work our way up to it. We have to practice over and over and over again, facing that deep existential fear that if I am kind to myself, if I am compassionate with myself, everyone is going to hate me, everyone is going to reject me, I'm going to destroy my own life, and everything's going to fall apart, and the worst of the worst of the worst is all going to happen. And then the second thing is when we have compassion for ourselves, it breaks the illusion that perfect love and perfect safety is just a self-improvement step away. It helps us to see the complexity of where we're at and why we have the habits that we do, and maybe the trauma that we've faced, and the complexity of the path that is going to be required that we walk in order to change the things that are needing to be changed, that are painful or objectively harmful, and the path we're going to have to take to change our mindsets, and the path we're going to have to take to get into a state where we can see that the lives that we're living actually are fine, the path we're going to have to take to grieve and be upset with our caregivers and then rearrange our whole relationship with that. Like, it becomes clear that it's going to be more complicated than just a 10-day fast or a 75 hard or a whatever self-improvement thing we thought we were going to do, right? I'll just lose weight. I'll just get the job. I'll just find the husband. That simple thing we thought was going to be the thing. When we start to have compassion for ourselves, it's going to open the window, open the door of awareness that it's not going to be that simple. And then third thing, it helps us to then understand that in our adulthood, that perfect love and that perfect safety that we've been seeking through all of our self-help and self-improvement and trying to change and fix ourselves is never going to happen. That is the most devastating part of the self-love journey, is realizing that what we wanted, that perfect love, that perfect safety, that being understood so that we could express ourselves and get our needs met perfectly, is never going to exist. That we are now going to have to figure out how to meet our own needs, how to be on our own side, how to find a life that feels good for us, one step at a time, within the chaotic world that we live in. It breaks the illusion that we're ever going to get to that perfect love that will equal perfect safety. Okay? So there's a reason why having compassion for ourselves is so difficult. It opens that Pandora's box of pain and all the things that we've been through that have hurt us and harmed us, that we've been pushing down and just believing if I just fix myself, this will all go away. It helps us to see, no, that's not it. We're going to have to process. We're going to have to get angry at our caregivers. We're going to have to question our perceptions. We're going to have to question our conditioning. We're going to have to learn to love and accept parts of ourselves that our caregivers are never going to love and accept. We're going to have to learn to be ways on this earth that culture isn't going to accept. We're going to have to change. We're going to have to process. We're going to have to grieve. We're going to have to feel emotions. We're going to have to get, right? It's deep, scary, hard work. It's letting go of that illusion and that promise that if I just fix myself, my whole world is going to come together and everything's going to be great and I'm never going to be in pain again and all of my needs are going to get met. This is why having compassion for ourselves is so hard. This is why we just want to stay shaming and blaming and guilting ourselves and believing that if I just fix myself, everything will get better. Okay, so I'm in that everyone is on safe mode. It's tough processing that there are no perfect people, no totally safe people, and I resent that reality. I hate being in the middle of processing that. And this is a big part of the process, and I promise you, you will not stay here forever. Okay? So this is why I'm saying that the compassion for yourself that feels like poison in the beginning is what is going to become the most sincere medicine. Because first things first is that we have compassion for you, that is true. We have to make room for this phase of anger and resentment and disappointment at the fact that people are not perfect and they are never going to be perfect. And we have to grieve the ways that we've been hurt. We have to grieve the ways that we've been let down, right? All those places where we used to blame and shame and guilt ourselves, we shift into a state and a period of time where we have to let ourselves be angry and upset and disappointed with other people, with our caregivers, with our friends, with our siblings, with the other authority figures in our lives. We have to go through that phase, right? And this is where a lot of spirituality, self-help, and personal growth just cut off our growth. Because they try to rush you to forgiveness. They try to rush you to just seeing that they're just imperfect people and that's fine. But it's not fine. Likely, most of the pain that you went through that really hurt you happened in your childhood. And it wasn't fine when you were a child because you couldn't defend yourself. You couldn't make it better for yourself. You couldn't walk away. And that treatment was programming you for what to expect in relationships, what to see as what love is. It was programming you about what you deserve and what you don't deserve and how to see yourself. So it was a big deal. It really harmed a lot of us. Which means we have to go through a phase of being validated in that, of being told over and over and over again, it wasn't your fault and you didn't deserve that and it wasn't okay. And being given permission not to forgive so that you don't turn that anger, that righteous anger, that appropriate anger and sadness and grief in on yourself anymore. We have to go through the phase of letting ourselves see others as being bad and harmful, and they hurt us, and it was shitty, and they shouldn't have done that. And we don't have compassion for them, and we don't try to see it from their perspective, and we don't because we need to go through a period of time where we are finally let off the hook of blaming ourselves for it, or trying to operate from our adult understanding that our childhood self that experienced that pain did not have. This is a huge part of the work I do in my one-on-one work, is guiding people through this phase of grieving and being upset and angry at their caregivers and other authority figures and friends that really damage them in this very, very vulnerable state of life that caused them to turn all that pain in on themselves. We have to go through that period of blaming other people and being upset about it and seeing that it wasn't our fault, and then seeing how it affected us and it created our patterns and our programs, and being upset about that. And then eventually we get to the place where we say, okay, I did not make this mess in my life. I am not the reason I have insecure attachment. I am not the reason I have all of these addictions. I am not the reason I have all these self-help, or, the reason I hate myself. I am not the reason that I was in my crazy 8 cycle of self-improvement and then going on a bender of my thing and then self-improvement and then going on my bender and then self-improvement and bender and bender. That was not my fault. But now I am the only one who can clean it up. Okay, so that compassion helps us understand why. And then we go through that phase of anger and blame and grief, where we finally stop turning all of that pain in on ourselves and we project it where it needs to go. We get mad at our caregivers, we get mad at the world, we get mad at society. And then we eventually get to a place where we can start to see where our power is now as adults. Because it is true that now as an adult, things are different. We do have power. We can shift things. We can set boundaries. We can start to express ourselves and be okay even if no one else approves of us. We can start to make these shifts and these changes. But that comes after we've already had a lot of compassion for ourselves. And we've been through the grieving, and we've been through the anger, and we've been through all of that. Okay? This is a process. So that's another thing, right? It's hard. It's hard to go through that. It's hard to go through that. It's hard to get angry. It's hard to let ourselves blame. And again, let go of this idea, this illusion that perfect love is somewhere. And if I just improve myself enough, I'll find it. We have to go through that phase. But as we go through that phase, and as we learn to have compassion for ourselves, and we learn to be angry at others, and we learn to be on our own side through our emotions, we learn to hold our emotions, we learn these things, we're building that capacity then to be our own safe place, to be our own source of love. We're learning to reparent ourselves. So then we can start to say, okay, when I'm in pain, what do I need? What's actually going on here? What's happening? Do I need a boundary? Do I need to process an emotion? Am I hungry? Am I sad? Is there a thing I need to express? Is there a thing I need to do and be? And we will have built that capacity to be on our own side enough that we can actually start to live as our genuine self, whether or not others understand us or approve of us, because we will have shifted our nervous system enough to see that it's not externals and other people understanding us now that create safety. Now, as an adult, I create safety for me, not by fixing myself, not by shaming and blaming and guilting myself, not by improving myself, but learning to understand myself the way my caregiver should have. Learning to empathize with myself the way my caregiver should have. And then learning how to understand what my needs are, what my wants are, what my patterns are, so I can be on my own side and get my needs met and investigate into what's happening. I can support myself. So we're no longer in that state of when I'm in pain, I try to fix myself in the hopes that someone outside of me will understand me and meet my need. We go, oh, I'm in pain, or I'm struggling, or I want something, or I want to express something, or something doesn't feel good for me. I then say, what's going on? What do I need? How can I support myself? What would feel good for me? What isn't feeling good for me? What emotion am I feeling? You see, we learn to be our own safe place. We learn to be our own secure connection. And being your own secure connection does not mean you are a perfect provider for yourself. It doesn't mean you have all the answers. It doesn't mean any of this perfection. It means I am always here to be on my own side, to investigate into what I need, and to support myself the best that I can. We will start to feel safe with ourselves when we learn how to be in pain, and rather than shaming and blaming and guilting ourselves and hoping that that's going to mean that someone else feels what's going on with us and figures it out for us, we can say, okay, I'm in pain. What do I need? How can I support myself? What am I feeling? How can I validate my feelings? How can I then shift my perception and all this stuff? So knowing that my child self feels a sense of control by hating myself is tough. My adult self is impatient, wanting to let go of that. The internal tension is exhausting. And again, right, this is why that adult self needs to have compassion for that child self. The first step in this is, okay, child self, I see you. It's okay. I totally get why you're doing this. And I love you. Thank you for trying to help me. Thank you for trying to help me by hating myself. Literally, this is how we deactivate that self-hate program. We use the adult self to immediately just validate, love, and be kind to that child self that is trying to hate you. You deactivate the tension immediately by just seeing it as your child self, right? And we don't fight with a child. We don't try to use adult logic on a child. What a child needs is to feel safe and loved. A child is not going to be logicked out of their behavior, and your inner child is not going to be logicked out of a behavior. This is, again, why this is so hard. Because all of us are trying to logic our way out of it. We're trying to convince our emotional, animal, old parts of our brain, old parts of our body, whatever you want to call it, into the new logic brain, and it's not going to work. Compassion and love is what heals the inner child, is what changes the inner child, is what interrupts the program. It's not going to be something you do logically. It's something you have to feel. So even I want you to practice it right now. How does it feel to approach that inner child? Not by trying to logic with them or fight with them or convince them or change it. Just, I see you. Thank you for trying to help me. I love you. What do you need to feel safe right now? How does that shift it? Don't fight with your inner child. Don't try to logic your way out of hating yourself. You compassion your way out of hating yourself. I see why you're doing this. I'm so sorry that people were mean to you. I'm so sorry that you were rejected and abandoned. That was not your fault. I see that you're hurting, and it's not your fault, and how can I support you? That's how we approach the inner child, over and over and over again. Because then you're proving to yourself that that perfect love that you always wanted, you can give it to yourself. Right? By rejecting the inner child, you're just perpetuating the same cycle. The inner child that hates you needs to be loved. Compassion. That is what is going to shift this whole thing around. Okay? Right? And this is why, again, my mystery school is 5 years. Because this work is tough. But you're not going to logic your way out of it. You're not going to reason your way out of it with your inner child. You have to kindness your way out of it. I see you. I know why you're doing this. And I love you. Your pain is not your fault. You are not broken. How can I love you? How can I support you? How can I be here for you? That's how we shift this. Okay? Does that make sense? Give it a try. Just for a week. Just see what happens. What happens if you don't argue with your inner child? What happens if you don't agree with them and you don't argue with them? You just be nice to them. Tell them you're sorry that they got hurt. Tell them that you're there for them and ask them what they need from you. See what that does. Okay? So I hope this was helpful, illuminating, and now you have a step. When you're hating yourself, see it as a child part of you that got hurt. Validate that it wasn't their fault that they got hurt. Validate their feelings. Ask them what they need. See how that shifts everything. Okay? Okay. So thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Take your time. Know that this is a process. If you need help, I have a million videos on YouTube. I have a gabillion blogs. I have a mystery school. I do one-on-one work. There are lots of other people out there, somatic people, therapists. There are lots of other people. I'm not the only source. Go find what resonates for you. Start learning to be on your own side, because it will change your life. It's hard. It's not logic. It's something we do on a feeling level. But it will change your life. Okay? Okay. So that's all for today. Thank you. And I'll see you next week.